Hey guys, so I've been doing my show Waveform for a while now, and it's been going pretty well, I think, but I wanted to try out another format. There are incredible games coming out all the time with some really interesting sound design, and I find that by the time I could make an entire episode of Waveform on them, a lot of the initial hype has sort of died off. So this series is called Things to Listen For. It's going to be much more casual than Waveform and feature really cool interviews with people in the industry to get different perspectives on sound design. I've got a couple very cool ones lined up in the near future that I think you're going to absolutely love. But if you enjoy Waveform, don't worry, because I'll always be working on an episode of that series. Alright, enough of that. Let's get into Breath of the Wild. Sit back for a minute, relax, and take a listen to this short gameplay video so we're all on the same page here with how the game sounds. Breath of the Wild was easily the most anticipated game of the year so far, certainly the game I was most excited for, which sucks because with things looking the way they are right now, I'll probably never play it in my entire life. But to make up for that, later in the video I'll be interviewing someone who has played it just to get a better perspective. But even just from watching streams and gameplay videos, which I've been doing a lot of, there are some things about the sound design that really stand out to me. Those things are player feedback sounds, magical sounds, and ambiences. Let's start with player feedback sounds. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean are the sounds that play when you do something good, like pick up a new item, unlock a shrine, kill an enemy, something like that. They're often pretty musical as well. These aren't just unique to Zelda though. Feedback sounds like this are in almost every game ever made. Even in a game like Battlefield 1, listen to this little chime that happens after you get a kill. In some games like Battlefield, the player feedback sounds are more subtle, and they almost just enter your subconscious and tell you that you did something good, but in Breath of the Wild, they're not subtle at all. They're very loud, they're super obvious. I'm not usually a huge fan of this style of sound design, but it's absolutely a standard in the Zelda series, and I think it works super well for their world and for their genre. In most games, I think a loud feedback jingle like that would just start to annoy me after a little while, especially if the art style in the game were more serious and realistic. But Zelda in general is more lighthearted and fun than most games, so the synergy there between the art style and the sound effects is what's most important. I certainly would never put something that musical or obvious into a more serious game like Battlefield 1. There are layers of player feedback sounds like this in almost every sound in Breath of the Wild, which is usually very typical of the JRPG genre, so definitely listen out for them. They really make things feel more responsive and fun. I mean, try to imagine killing an enemy with like a giant club and all you hear is a realistic wood club sound hitting the ground or something. It just wouldn't work anywhere near as well. And most importantly, it just wouldn't feel like a Zelda game, really. Ambiences are the next part of the game that I absolutely love, so to really understand them, I wanted to talk to someone who knows what it's like to be sucked into the world and play the game for a long period of time. So I asked my friend Brionna to chat about it. She's a game sound designer and was a production coordinator on the Legend of Zelda Symphony of the Goddesses tour. She's an all-around Zelda fanatic, which makes her the perfect person to talk to for this. Here's what she had to say.
The sound is so comparable to the design of the game itself in that everything is so incredibly well thought out. You start on the Great Plateau and you're walking around and all you hear is the ambiance. All you hear is like the wind and the grass. You don't really get a whole lot in the way of like score. You get little like piano cues as you go to different areas and things like that. But as far as like those full grand orchestral scores, you really don't have that, and like it makes this game so much more immersive, I think. The stereo field is incredible. So you if the wind is say blowing from right to left, if you turn the camera, it pans to the opposite side and you can tell where the wind's coming from. And with that, depending on where you are, the wind sounds completely different. If you're in an area with like dried grass, for example, you can hear that dried grass crunching as opposed to being somewhere in the snow. It sounds completely different.
The thing I love about the ambiences and the environments here is how they walk the line between cartoonish and exaggerated, but are also super calming. If you're wandering around at night, for example, and there are crickets around you, it sounds fairly loud and cartoonish, but it still manages to relax you and doesn't sound so unrealistic that you don't believe the world you're in. Because we already know the world is magical, we don't really second guess when the environment sounds a little bit strange as well. We kind of expect it. Brionna also told me to watch this cool interview snippet about the making of Breath of the Wild, where they talk about how the music was written to complement the atmospheres in the game. Check this out.
今作は、ピアノがメインの、BGM になっていて、その他は結構もう環境音をもっとなんていうんですかね、引き立たせようというようなサウンドになっていて、 BGM をこう盛り上げるというよりかは実際にそこにある、地形であるとか景色であるとかっていうところの、そのままを伝えられるような環境音っていうのが一番合うんだろうなと思っていて、そこはもう加入当初から考えていたところなんですけれども、街の曲ってあんまりこうじっくり聴かないと分かんないかもしれないですけれども、今作時間が流れているので、昼の様子、夜の様子、景色的にもどんどん環境が変わっていくので雰囲気も変わるわけですけれども、曲も実は、昼と夜とで変わっているんですが、それがうまい具合にこうだんだんテンポが遅くなって楽器が、少なくなっていくっていう、夜に向けてはそうなりますし、朝に向けてはだんだんテンポが速くなっていて楽器がちょっとずつ追加されていってっていうようなところの表現が結構大変、データ的な仕組みも結構大変だったんですけれども、そういうのは苦労したところですね。
I absolutely love the creative choice here to cut back on music in favor of atmosphere. If you saw Waveform Episode 3 on Open World Audio, you know that one of my biggest complaints about open world games lately is their overuse of music, especially during exploration and things like that. In my opinion, the game becomes 10 times more immersive when the soundtrack is subtle and lets you appreciate the environment more. This brings me to the last part of the game that I want to talk about, which is different magical sounds. Magic is just one of those things like gunshots that, if you're not careful, can really start to sound samey and just fall a little bit flat. But in Breath of the Wild, the magic sounds are really perfect for each situation, whether that's a cutscene or in combat. They all have a great way of delivering information to the player while not being too aggressive or in your face. Here, listen to this example and pay attention to the way the piano and the sound effects come together. There's nothing over the top about it. It's not the most impressive, revolutionary sound design the world has ever seen, but it fits perfectly into the world. And all of the magical sounds just have the right amount of positive feedback, like we were talking about before. And it's also just got a really cool aura and magical undertone. I guess that sentence describes this whole game pretty well. Breath of the Wild sounds incredible, and the music and atmospheres I think are reason enough to check it out. Next time you're playing or watching gameplay, listen for the player cues and the subtle soundtrack choices they made. Hopefully it increases your appreciation for the amount of work that goes into a truly beautiful project like this one. If you guys like the format of this new series, leave a comment and let me know what games you'd like to see me talk about next. On the other hand, if you have the game and you feel like commenting, "Oh yeah, it's amazing, sucks you don't have it," well, then yeah, you're right. It does suck. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.